You're walking through an endless desert. No electricity, no refrigerator, no modern technology. Then, in the middle of all that heat, you notice a small doorway built into a massive structure made of earth. You push it open and slowly make your way down a set of steps. And at the bottom, you find something that shouldn't be there. Ice. Not a thin layer of frost, actual blocks of ice. And somehow, they've been sitting underground for months. So how could people living in one of the hottest, driest regions on Earth produce ice without electricity? The story starts about 3,800 years ago. Near the Euphrates River, in what is now Syria, there once stood a kingdom called Mari. Its king, Zimri Lim, ordered an ice house to be built at Turka. Back then, ice wasn't manufactured. It had to be collected. During the cold season, people gathered natural ice and snow from colder areas and nearby mountains, transported it into the city, and stored it underground. Then, when the heat returned, the king could use that ice to chill his wine. But there was an obvious problem. No matter how carefully you stored it, the amount of natural ice was limited. So what if you could make the ice yourself? The Persians found a way. Centuries ago, they developed an entire system for producing, storing, and distributing ice. At the center of that system was a structure called a Yakhchal. The word literally means ice pit, and its most recognizable feature was a huge mud brick dome rising out of the desert. But the dome wasn't where the ice was actually made. Outside the Yakhchal was a wide, shallow pool. That was the real ice factory. Next to it stood a tall wall. Its job was simple but incredibly important: to keep the pool in shadow. During the winter, the wall blocked sunlight from reaching the water for much of the day, helping the pool stay colder and reducing the amount of heat it absorbed before nightfall. And night was when the real work began. In places like Yazd, summer temperatures can climb to 40 or even 50 degrees Celsius. But winter nights can fall below freezing. So in the evening, workers poured a shallow layer of water into the pool, usually around 5 to 10 centimeters deep. Over the cold winter night, that thin layer could freeze. The next evening, another layer of water was added on top. Then another. Night after night, the process was repeated. Slowly, the ice became thicker. Eventually, it could reach around half a meter. At that point, workers broke the ice apart, cut it into large blocks, and carried those blocks into the nearby Yakhchal. So how much ice could a system like this actually produce? Modern building physics research has simulated the traditional ice-making pools around Meybod using typical climate data from Yazd. One pool had an area of roughly 400 square meters. Over the course of a winter, it could accumulate around 50 cubic meters of ice. To put that into perspective, if you cut all of that into the kind of small ice cubes you might drop into a drink today, you'd end up with roughly 3 million cubes. 3 million. And in colder years, or when natural ice brought in from elsewhere was added to the supply, the total amount could be even larger. But producing the ice was only half the problem, because summer was coming. And summer in central Iran could be brutally hot. So how did they stop all that ice from simply melting away? Under the dome of the Yakhchal was a deep underground chamber, sometimes around 5 meters below ground level. The lower sections were surrounded by massive mud brick walls. Some were nearly 2 meters thick. Underground, temperatures changed much more slowly than they did at the surface, and those enormous walls added another layer of protection. Heat from the outside couldn't easily pass through them. That is what made the Yakhchal so clever. It wasn't just storing ice. It was using the cold of an entire winter to fight the heat of an entire summer. And this wasn't always a tiny private operation. Historical research suggests that some Yakhchals were maintained collectively by local communities. Others were operated commercially by merchants. When winter ended, the ice was sealed underground. Then, months later, when the worst summer heat arrived, the ice house would finally be opened again. In some villages, the reopening of the Yakhchal was even marked with a celebration, because after months of scorching heat, people were once again gaining access to one of summer's greatest luxuries: ice. For us, an ice cube is almost meaningless. You press a button on a refrigerator or open a freezer, and there it is. For them, that same piece of ice represented months of preparation. It was winter, saved for later. The kingdom of Mari had learned how to bring ice down from colder seasons and distant mountains and preserve it inside the city. The Persians went one step further. They connected water, shade, cold winter nights, dry air, underground storage, and massive earthen architecture into one system. A system capable of carrying ice across the seasons. From a thin layer of water freezing under a clear winter sky to a cold drink in the middle of summer, there was no magic in between. Just an extremely careful use of heat, light, water, air, and time. One dome, one shallow pool, one tall wall, and above it all, the open night sky, quietly carrying heat away on every clear winter night. The ancient Persians never conquered the desert. They simply learned how to do something far more elegant, how to save an entire winter for the next summer.